1. This happened to me when I was around 6 years old in the mid-90s. My father was a Finnish carpenter at the time, and I went to work with him one day. He was working on restoring an old hotel called the Feather River Inn in Plymouth County, California. The inn was built in 1915 and was also a preparatory school. It has now been vacant for a long time. At the time, I knew the inn had a history of being haunted, or at least very spooky. My dad had told me about the place and about stories he had heard. He later had his own story. I was little at the time and didn't really think too much about it, but I remember I was excited to go and see it in person. The third floor was abandoned and was in really bad disrepair. I remember it being really dark and in shambles. Think any kind of old abandoned building look. We went to the third floor to look around because there were really weird paintings in some of the rooms. They were painted in all black and white swirls like hypnosis circles. The crew imagined boys from prep school probably drew them, but no one knew for sure. The strangest thing was they even found mummified cats in one of the walls up there. The second floor was where they were working that day. As we walked there, we passed colonies of bat balls on the ceilings. They were literal balls of bats all clinging together. The place was very eerie. So I remember the second floor was shaped like a big square with one hallway around the perimeter. The halls were very long. The part of the hall they were working in was in good shape and lit. There were other guys working all down this part, busy doing things. I was standing at one end looking all the way down the hall. I realized someone was peeking around the corner at the other end of the hall. It was a woman. You can tell I was little at the time because I just assumed it was the wife of one of my dad's crew members. She had long black curly hair, fair skin, dark eye makeup, and dark clothes. She really resembled this man's wife, so I excitedly started to wave at her, but she didn't wave back. This went on for a while and I felt really confused. I started to feel strange because no one else in the hall was reacting. She was just deadpan staring at me, so I reflexively turned to look behind myself. Maybe she was looking past me. When I turned back, she was gone. I thought this was weird, so I walked down the hall and turned the corner. When I looked down this part of the hall, it was totally black and all a mess. They hadn't even started working on this part yet. That's when I got pretty scared because it all sank in at once. I realized the position that the woman was standing in was not normal. You could not see her lower half at all from around the corner. It was like her upper half was sticking out from around the side. At that point I realized that her hair was not curly. It was like out of control. She wasn't fair-skinned, she was basically pure white. Her dark makeup was actually just two big vacant holes of eyes. It's crazy looking back on this experience because it's like, what on earth was I thinking waving at that? It is also strange that it took a while for me to process how creepy she looked. I still can totally see her and the whole experience in my mind's eye. I can't totally remember her expression, though. I think it was just blank or serious, not smiling. Can't remember what I did next. But I know I have talked about it with my parents in the past. Basically everyone who has spent time there has had a strange experience. Whatever I saw, it was so vivid and there that I interacted with it. Any thoughts or ideas? 2. So recently I'm into real-life paranormal encounters, which is funny, since I'm not able to watch stuff like horror movies alone. I always knew that spirits, entities, and so on existed. I got the proof when I was around 4 or 5. I saw a ghost standing beside my bed. Since I was so young, I got scared, hid under my blanket, and turned on the light. When I told my mother and father the next day about it, they asked me to describe it. When I described the lady, my dad went pale as I had just described his mother, and fair enough. When my father called around in the family, he found out that this is the night my grandmother had passed away. The reason my parents were so concerned, or better confused, is because I haven't seen my grandmother since I was an infant, and no older than 8 months. So I shouldn't have memories of her. That theme was pretty consistent in my life. I always saw someone out of the corner of my eyes or knew something I shouldn't be able to know, since they were about events that didn't happen or people I never met. When I was around 8, we moved across the country and I was bullied so bad that I had 2 suicide attempts, luckily unsuccessful. but since the second attempt I'm no longer able to see them. But I feel when someone is near and still have my good intuition. When I was no longer able to see them, I got extremely scared of everything supernatural, because I like to see what I'm up against. The past 3 years my fear rapidly declined, since I started at the gymnasium and found friends who were able to see them, got rabbits, which are a pretty good alert system, since they can see them, and especially my bigger rabbit. Isla is not having it, and I got a cat, who's following me everywhere I go, so I have quite a good early warning system. I also started to see them out of the corner of my eye. Since my fear also declined, I started looking into mythologies, gods, and paranormal activity near me. However, my mother has a dog. We never really got along. We don't hate each other, it's just mutual respect and nothing more. That dog is completely fixated on my mom. Wherever she is, that dog has to be. Even when my mom just leaves the room for 2 minutes, the dog gets up and follows her. If she can't, she begins to whine. I recently started university, so we have to find a flat for me since my uni is over 500 kilometers away from my parents' house. When we drove here, I had the feeling someone followed us. I had unexplained goosebumps. I suddenly felt really cold, despite the fact that the room was 25 degrees centigrade, around 77 Fahrenheit. My technology went completely crazy, and I woke up several times with unexplained wounds. As explained, the dog is a complete mum dog. But since we got here, she's not leaving my side. She even wants to sleep with me, which is completely unlike her. Because we have a tight schedule with the flat, my mother and I are quite stressed. Every time shits are about to go down, the dog starts growling, which is unlike her. Bark, yes, she's a dog, dogs do that from time to time, but growling. Never, not even at the vet or with other dogs. To circle back, I watched some YouTube videos about paranormal investigation. Every time they contacted the spirit, I had the overwhelming urge to cry. I even did it 2 times. Now I have the constant feeling of someone watching me, and the dog moved even closer to me. Also, the whole room seems to be filled with orbs, especially around them, and I have no clue what that means, especially since the orbs are only in the corner I'm in. And when I try to take a picture, it seems like they run away from the camera. The orbs seem to be nice, but there's a corner darker than normal, and every time I look there I start to cry. Has anyone any idea what's happening right now? 3. When I was a child, I had a bunk bed and would sleep on the top bunk. In my bedroom, there was a suitcase at the foot of the bed next to the door. Not sure why. On that suitcase was a pile of clothes. Also not sure why they were there on the suitcase and not put away. One night I went to bed, climbed into the top bunk, said my prayers as usual, had my bedtime story as usual. Everything was normal. I went to sleep. I think I was asleep. I was dreaming, I think. I was still in my bed, wanting to climb down, but when I looked down, instead of a pile of clothes on the suitcase, there was a fox. And for some reason, I was afraid of it. I backed into the furthest corner of the bed and stayed there. It would ask if it could climb up onto my bed. I was afraid, so would tell it no. It said it just wanted to talk with me. I told it that it could talk to me without getting onto my bed. So we spent the night talking, with it asking me questions and I would answer, just general questions about my day and things. Maybe trying to get me to relax and let my guard down, not sure. The next night, same routine of going to bed, saying prayers, having bedtime story, falling asleep. I had a dream again. I was in my bed. Needed to go down to use the restroom. I looked down and there was the fox again. Instead of being on the suitcase, the fox was sitting a couple of steps up the bunk bed. Not technically on my bed, but still on the steps. It still scared me, and it seemed to be able to tell, so we kept talking that night. This process repeated itself over several nights. Each night, the fox would climb another step or 2 higher. It would ask me about school, about my friends, about what I wanted to be when I grew up, about everything going on in my life. Every night I would refuse to let it into my bed. Eventually it got to the top step, but I still refused to let it on my bed, and it respected that. If somewhat exasperated, annoyed, and frustrated. Well, after it climbed up to the top, and I still refused to let it on my bed, as I was still afraid of it, I never saw it at night in my dreams again, and I eventually had my mom move the suitcase. After these events transpired, I started playing with an imaginary friend. I was the only one who saw it and interacted, obviously. I would run around in the woods around my house playing with it, climbing trees, playing tag, and, obvious plot twist, my imaginary friend was a fox. In my child's mind at the time, it didn't connect that the fox of my dreams and the fox I was playing with could have been the same entity. After all, the fox in my dreams scared me, the feeling it wanted to devour me, kind of, while pretending to care and be nice. This one was fun to play with and comforting. The fact that the scary fox disappeared and suddenly I had a fun fox friend didn't bother me for some reason. Thank you for listening. This is my first experience that seemed to open the floodgates of paranormal, or at least unusual activity in my life. At a very young age, starting around 4 years old. Lots of different types of events since then. 4. It was August when I moved in. At the time, my mother had been suffering from multiple health issues for months, and had to be in and out of different hospitals fairly often. She and my father slept in different bedrooms since she had grown more and more agitated about my father's loud snoring. In the months that I stayed with them, my mother's bedroom always made me feel a bit uncomfortable. She had rose-pink organza draperies hanging around the canopy bed, and the room did not get much sunlight, since its only window faced northeast. I've never wanted to stay there for longer than 15 minutes. Due to her illness, my mother lost more than 30 pounds and weighed a mere 85 pounds at the end of October. She had all these antibiotic-resisting infections affecting multiple organs. Her doctors were extremely puzzled and couldn't pinpoint what the actual causes were. It was heart-wrenching to see my mother slowly withering into an extremely frail and depressive person. At one point, she even thought that she was dying. In early December, one of my mother's cousins came over to the house for the first time and was very concerned about my mother's bedroom immediately. It's full of messy energies, as she described how she felt, and said it had given her a bad headache as soon as she entered the bedroom. That got my parents' attention. My mom's cousin informed my parents that she knew someone special who might be able to help with my mother's odd illness. The person was a medicine man and feng shui master. Running out of options, my parents agreed to invite the master to the house the following week. I was home with them on the day the master arrived. He first instructed my father to remove all the wooden statues my father had collected over the years. "You can put them in the garage or storage room. Definitely not in your living space," the master claimed. According to him, each of those statues carried their own chaotic energies and were not the friendly ones. When he entered my mother's bedroom, he shook his head in disbelief, told us that there were things he did not like and he needed to get rid of them ASAP. He handed my father a hulu, calabash in Chinese, used by traditional medicine men and women as containers for various substances. The master then told my father to leave it in my mother's bedroom with the lid open, and then we waited. That was in the late afternoon. My father and the master's assistant were at work moving the wooden statues from the house to the garage, while my mother resting in the guest room with me. Around dinner time, my mother started to develop a horrible panic attack. She was extremely jittery, short of breath, and could not stop scratching her chest. She told me it felt like something was inside her chest and she needed to get it out. I had never seen my mother that way. Her face and chest were beet red and she acted like a wounded, angry animal. Scared and alarmed, I ran to the garage to tell everyone what was going on. The master yelled out, "We've got something." He instructed my father to retrieve the hulu from my mother's bedroom and put the lid back on. My father followed the order and brought out the hulu and then handed it to the master. Right after that, my mother's panic attack subsided quickly, like nothing had ever happened. Her face and chest returned to her normal pale, fair tone, with the visible red scratch marks she had done to herself just moments ago, and she was calm. The master grabbed the hulu and stared at it for a while, then closed his eyes before declaring that we caught it. What was in the hulu? We all wanted to know. According to the master, it seemed to be a type of black magic, an ill-intended spell that someone had cast on the house. However, my mother was not necessarily the target. It was only because she had a weak immune system to begin with that made it easy for the bad energy to attach onto her. Strangely, after that unexplainable event, my mother's health was improving day by day. The next spring, she regained her health. Even the doctors were amazed by it. My parents did not tell the doctors what had happened with the master, since they didn't think the doctors would believe them after all. That was more than 10 years ago. Until today, we still have zero idea what the hell was going on. I'm just feeling grateful that my mother is still with us, with good health and all. And they still live in that house, happily and peacefully. 5. I am one of those people who eats, sleeps, and breathes horror. I love the macabre, ghost stories, and especially historic locations known for their paranormal activity. Yes, it really is pronounced macabre. Don't at me. I've only just begun my journey of staying at as many haunted hotels as possible. But this experience was different than the few I've had thus far. It wasn't my first, and although I have this deep sense of dread as I say it, it certainly won't be my last. My husband, who is on the rocks about most things paranormal and thinks I'm an absolute psychopath, respects and accepts my passion. To celebrate my 28th birthday, he let me know a week before the date that we would be traveling somewhere and staying there for 2 nights as a surprise. I had a feeling deep in my gut that we would be driving to Austin to stay at the Driscoll Hotel. With that in mind, I packed up my bags and made sure to include my camcorder and my tripod just in case. The weeks slowly crawled by, but we finally found ourselves on the road headed down I-10. And once we hit Interstate 71, I knew we were headed to Austin. Once we made it to the city, we turned into Brazos Street. The rest was history. We had officially arrived to the infamous Driscoll Hotel. We entered into the grand lobby, and there Colonel Jesse Driscoll stood in darkness contained with an ornate golden frame. As we carried our suitcases past the lonely man, I could see the sadness in his eyes. We took the lift up to the 8th floor to find our room. The hallways were thoughtfully decorated with stunning artwork every 3 feet or so from each other. And it was clear that the design throughout the structure would have delighted most, if not all, of their political and socialite guests. We stepped into our room, and to my surprise it was light and airy. Nothing about this room made me feel uneasy. We changed our clothes, unpacked our belongings, and planned to go out for a light meal to kick off the evening. Before leaving the room, I plugged in my camcorder to charge in preparation for our first night. After eating a small meal, we made our way to Joe's coffee shop and watched the soft rain fall into the pavement around us as we patiently waited for the tour to begin. We thought we might be the only ones on the tour, considering the weather was not ideal, and of course the reality of the pandemic being the backdrop of everywhere we went. But to our surprise, it was a full house. There were a handful of other couples, 2 families with small children, and a pair of friends. We first discussed the Frost Tower, and then the Spaghetti Warehouse, the Speakeasy, and then a great story about the first heavily documented serial killer in America, who allegedly may have been Jack the Ripper, who may have resided in Austin, Texas as a butcher prior to moving to Europe. Just when I thought I couldn't wait any longer, we turned the corner and there the Driscolls sat, waiting for her story to be told. Having done research on the hotel prior to staying, I was expecting the guy to bring up the death of Samantha Houston and the creepy painting of her that is located in the building. However, I apparently hadn't done enough research because there were not 1 but 2 additional stories that I found particularly sinister that I had not heard prior. The suicide brides had begun. Long story short, it is believed the 2 young women who were in the hotel for their honeymoons had both committed suicide by gruesomely shooting themselves in the stomach and bleeding out in the bathtub. The craziest part is they both stayed at room 525 and had both taken their lives in the same bathtub exactly 20 years apart. I have a habit of getting really excited to stay at haunted hotels, and then after taking the ghost tour I got pretty freaked out. It wouldn't stop me from staying the night, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't ready for a drink or 6 as a precaution to sleep peacefully through the night. We headed to the Driscoll bar and enjoyed the busy atmosphere, discussing all of the new things we just learned. After I finally felt all warm and fuzzy, it was time to go find the famous painting of Samantha Houston on the 5th floor. The floor level we were staying on was a straight hallway and nothing more. When we exited the elevator onto the 5th and saw the straight hall in front of us, I thought it must be pretty similar, and we would find the painting in no time. I looked to my right, expecting to see a wall similar to the 8th level, but instead was met with yet another long hall. My curiosity pulled me down the mystery hall, so we veered and began walking. About midway, I was met by another opening to yet another long hallway. Wow, the 5th floor was like a maze. We wandered for a bit. I sang her name as we stepped quietly through. Samantha, I giggled drunkenly. Where are you? My eyes finally met hers. She gazed at me as if she had heard me calling for her. Her eyes had no evil in them. She was pure innocence. Her eyes were big and beautiful, much like that of a deer. I filmed from afar and slowly walked up to the painting. We took a few photos, and then headed up to the room, completely forgetting about room 525, which I'm actually 100% okay with. We settled into our room and talked a bit about the night until we got too tired to stay up any longer. Before getting into bed, I put my camcorder off the charger, turned it on, and confirmed it had 100% battery and placed it on the tripod and began filming the night. It had to have been roughly 2 a.m. when I was awoken by a fly buzzing around my face. I watched him zoom back and forth, and then I finally slapped him down. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, where I then shined the light onto my hand and could see what was left of the fly and his blood. I don't remember a lot after that, but I must have fallen back to sleep. I must have been dreaming because the next time I woke up, I was standing in the corner of the room right about where my tripod was set up. I looked at the bed, and there I saw my husband and myself sleeping. I stood there frozen. My husband was sleeping in a normal position, but my head was halfway down the mattress and my feet hanging off the bottom. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I can't explain how. It didn't feel like a long time after that I seemed to have woken up, now back in bed. And I began screaming and crying hysterically, and my husband turned over and comforted me, and I laid there awake for quite some time until I fell back to sleep. Again, I find myself standing in the corner of the room in the same spot as before, but this time was different. I could see my husband in bed, and to be quite honest, I don't recall whether I was in bed with him or not, because my attention was on the other side of the room. From the corner I was standing in, I had a clear shot of the entrance into the powder room and bathroom, where I saw a woman dressed in housekeeper clothes. I could tell in that moment that her outfit was not from our time. She crossed the door frame from the power room with the vacuum and went into the bathroom where I could no longer see her. She then took a step backwards, back into the door frame, as if she had perhaps seen something that caught her attention, and looked right at me. She had dark hair that was pulled back, and she stood there in silence. She was clearly right there in front of my eyes, but she had this washed-out presence about her. She was not bright, just illuminating some form of dim, bluish low light that looked like she was fading. The exchange of looks made me feel as though I was the one who was watching her, and then she carried on with her duties out of my sight. Finally, it was daylight the next time I woke up. Despite feeling as though I was hit by a bus and got absolutely no rest, I had never been so excited for morning, and the first thing I did was turn over to my husband, exhausted. I started by explaining the weird fly that woke me, and then proceeded to ask if he remembered me waking up crying. He said that he was 100% sure that he had not been woken up, nor did he hear me crying or screaming. After this, I realized maybe I had been dreaming when I thought I was awake. I was completely lost in my own reality. I then remembered that I had been recording the whole night, and I rushed to the camcorder and pulled it off of the tripod to review the footage. Upon powering on the camcorder, I was greeted with the message, "Corrupt file." I was in disbelief about the events that took place the night before, and now I would never know if I had potentially caught something on video. I saw no blood anywhere or any remnants of the fly, and no evidence of the events that took place. I was defeated and terrified that I had to stay at this hotel room for another night. The close of the story is this. I did not record the second night because I felt as though maybe that provoked whatever I experienced the night prior. After more drinking and lots of lights on, I managed to sleep on night 2 with no disturbances. When we returned home, I was having trouble sleeping for about 4 days because I kept having this feeling that I was being watched. It finally shook off in time, and I'm recharged and ready to go check out another haunted location. But this was definitely something that I did not expect and will never forget. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 254. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Yep. Tried to edit most of that crap out, but I apologize if any slipped through while I was recording. This is going to be going on till January. At least. No, definitely January. Usually quiets down by then. Managed to get the recording done, but it was like record a line, bit of a line, pause. Okay, right. Enough grumbles. We have a birthday shout out today. All right. And today's birthday shout out goes to, it comes from Vanapira Rain, and it goes to her mother, Mama Wolf. Hey, Mama Wolf. And, well, we will be polite and not ask how old she is, but her birthday is today. Let's pretend the fireworks are not there to annoy me, but are there to celebrate the great day that is Mama Wolf's birthday. And before I head off and go pick a fight with whoever's setting off those fireworks, going to be a lot of fights, there's a lot of people, I'd like to sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mama Wolf. Happy birthday to you. Alright, and we'll wrap things up there for now. Before I go, I'll just add, if you would like a birthday shout out, don't leave it in the comments. I'm not going to say it. I will forget it's there. What you ought to do is send me an email to kingofthecities@gmail.com. You can find that in the description of this video and any other one. Any other video. Just pop an email along there with who it's for. If it's for yourself, totally fine. About half of them I get for the person asking. And when it is, you don't have to tell me your age. Always tease people about that, but you can if you like. You don't have to. And what name you'd like to be shouted out by. If it's your own name, fine. If it's your username, that's also fine too. What was I saying? Oh yes, yesterday's glitch video is up now. A day late, but it's up. I was working on it all of yesterday. It just took that long to get it. By the time it was done, it was way too late to upload it. You know, if you upload at certain times, basically people don't see them. So I waited till today. So you get this. Glitch was a few hours ago. Paranormal today. And I'm going to, hopefully, when the fireworks settle down a bit later, record tomorrow's video, so I'm not fighting against the noise to get it done. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.